Fellas, I don't know if you've noticed, but the last few TWABs have been extremely long, as well as confusing. Bungie's most recent TWAB was literally just a clarification for the mega TWAB we received 2 weeks ago, and I was still confused. So the team and I have actually picked apart and broken down both of these TWABs to figure out exactly what major changes are coming to the game next season and if they're good or not. So let's start with Glaives. Currently, it's confusing what perks Glaives should be activating and synergizing with because of its melee and projectile capabilities. Glaive melees should trigger melee perks like Swashbuckler and Grave Robber. Because Glaive melees do not consume powered melee charge, they should not trigger powered melee perks. For example, Combination Blow. Now, Glaive melees benefit from the melee damage buffs, and Glaive projectiles benefit from weapon damage buffs. Now, we bring this up because Glaives are actually being buffed significantly in Season 17 to make up for their poor performance. Melee damage is actually being buffed by a whopping 25% inside of PvE. This does not include bosses or vehicles though. They also reduce shield energy drain while in use by 30%, so your shield will even last longer. The projectile speed is now tied to your range stat, and it's important to note that this is to a buff. So expect Glaives to perform better across the board next season, and the exotic Glaives are also getting some custom tuning, most notably the Titan Glaive, which will now act as essentially a bubble, especially when you pair it with things like Helm of Saint. You'll get the shield benefits in and out, and I'm excited for both the Hunter and Warlock Glaives. Now, moving on to Flinch. This was a major topic, guys, and we have a lot to break down here in regards to Flinch. Flinch is your aim deflection upon receiving damage. Now, the stability weapon stat has been rebuilt to grant flinch resistance in addition to its other effects. So, of course, keeping the weapon stable when you shoot it. Now, this change means that you'll be able to build for flinch resistance specifically, especially for primary weapons. Bungie doesn't want special weapons to be easier to use while under fire, so you won't be able to build into special weapon flinch resistance as easily. You'll have base flinch resistance dependent on your weapon's archetype with a max of 10% to 25%. So auto rifles, submachine guns, bows 25%, pulse rifles, scout rifle, sidearm machine guns at 20%, hand cannons at 15% with trace rifles, infusion rifles, shotgun, snipers, grenade launchers, and linear fusion rifles at 10%. And you can see where it scales down for specials. Now, Bungie states in the Mega TWAB that any stability stat under 20 actually gives a flinch resistance penalty, which is why the other day when we were reviewing the title, we even brought up the fact that you need to try to use barrel perks that didn't negatively hurt your stability, or at least drop it below 20. And matter of fact, I think it was like full bore and like a regular barrel perk that didn't help stability would result in your weapon being at 19 stability. And this is really targeting even SMGs like Multimac. Like if you have Multimac with Iron Reach, that's driving your stability down less than 20. And Bungie's doing this because they know that on mouse and keyboard and on PC, people have been getting away with using max range with no thought towards stability. Now with this change though, there will be penalties for not having at least 20 stability. So if you have a weapon with 20 stability, you won't receive any flinch resistance, but you also won't receive a penalty as long as it's 20. But if you have 100 stability on your sniper rifle, you will receive only 10% flinch resistance because that is the max for that archetype. Another example, if you have 100 stability on a pulse rifle, you are granted 20% flinch resistance, and so on. So again, those weapon percentages or archetype percentages of flinch resistance, that is the max, and you can reach that max by getting 100 stability. Now, obviously, some weapons can do that, some not so much. I know there's going to be some questions, Cross. What about perks like Perpetual Motion or Rapid Hit? Perks that generate stability, does that actually tie into flinch resistance as well? That's a good question. We're still trying to get clarification on that. Now, this doesn't translate to exact number and degrees of flinch, since depending on the zoom of your weapon, that number will vary. If you want a real-world comparison, when you're using a pair of binoculars and someone bumps you, your view is going to change drastically compared to if you're looking at something with your naked eyes. And Bungie has taken these differences and zooms into account when tuning these numbers. But let's say you normally take 10 degrees of flinch when hit while using a scout rifle. If your weapon stability is 100, then you immediately receive a 20% resistance to that 10 degrees, and now you will only receive 8 degrees. So again, no weapon is going to mitigate flinch completely. There's caps on all of them. Now, stability isn't the only way you can receive less flinch. Your resilience stat will now also grant flinch resistance, as well as some armor mods and abilities. Bungie is making these changes because they want us to have the option to build into flinch resistance, and on screen is a list of all the common sources of flinch resist that can stack multiplicatively and their respective values. Now, if you want to calculate your flinch resistance, all you have to do is multiply these different values together based on what you have equipped, convert the total from a decimal to a percentage, then subtract from 100. This is your flinch resistance. Flinch resistance is something that you may not be able to mitigate completely, but with a combination of mods, builds, abilities, and of course the the archetype of the weapon by default in its stability stats, and of course your resilience. There'll be a lot of ways to now combat it, and this is going to be extremely beneficial for primary weapons. Now moving on to airborne gunplay. Modifiers that are usually applied while airborne are getting some fundamental changes next season. Primary weapons will now have less randomness in their projectile accuracy while in the air, but you'll also have less aim assist in the air unless you build heavily into airborne gunplay. Now this entirely new weapon stat is called Airborne Effectiveness and will be present on all weapons, with a few exceptions like swords. Now note that this new airborne stat won't be visible presently until season 18, but you will be able to check them through your preferred API like things like LightGG, Gunsmith, and Destiny Item Manager. Now airborne effectiveness isn't just tied to your weapon. You'll need to build into your weapon, subclass, and armor in order to maximize your airborne efficiency. Thankfully, similar to our weapon stats, airborne effectiveness runs from 0 to 100. You cannot drop below 0, and anything over 100 gives no added benefits. Each weapon will have a set airborne effectiveness stats, but each archetype has an airborne effectiveness range in which they'll fall under. For example, hand cannons can only have an airborne effectiveness between 0 and 25. So you can have a hand cannon with 23, 24, or even 25 airborne effectiveness, but you won't have one with 30 because that's out of the hand cannon stat range. Now the same goes for auto rifles and pulse rifles, which also land between that 0 and 25 range. Now exotics are a weird one as they're all individually tuned, and sometimes they even exceed these values. They don't really follow the same rules due to them being exotic. And what you're seeing on the screen are actually airborne effectiveness stat ranges for each archetype. Higher tiers of legendary weapons, like weapons from trials, raids, or nightfalls, will fall under the upper end of these ranges, and exotics sometimes exceed them. Sweet Business, for example, has a 27 airborne effectiveness stat, even though the auto rifle max is technically 25. Now, different amounts of investment into airborne effectiveness stat will result in noticeable changes to in-air accuracy and aim assist. Now, this still works in a linear manner, meaning each individual point matters. For example, an airborne stat of 45 is technically better than a stat of 44, although it may not be noticeable. These values down below are simply guidelines to what you can expect with these amounts of airborne effectiveness. So 0 to 30, this airborne stat offers a smaller accuracy penalty than usual, but with significantly lower aim assist. 31 to 50, this airborne stat offers about the same in-air accuracy as Icarus equipped weapons do currently, but with noticeably lower aim assist. 51 to 70, this stat offers better accuracy than weapons with Icarus, with fewer misses due to randomness, but with reduced aim assist. Bungie says this will take substantial investment to reach. 71 to 99, no airborne accuracy penalty with very slightly less aim assist. And if you somehow magically make it to 100 airborne stat, no airborne accuracy penalties and the same aim assist we currently have in the air in the live game. Now to reach these high airborne stat values, you'll not only have to build into in-air gunplay by utilizing the airborne effectiveness stats on your weapons, but also the airborne effectiveness stat bonuses you get from subclass abilities and certain exotic armor pieces. Now there are only a few subclass abilities that add in-air effectiveness that you have to look out for. Warlocks will have heat rises, Titans have tempered metal, and all classes have the Whisper of Hedron stasis fragment. Unless, let's say, changes are made with Solo 3.0 and they turn tempered metal into a fragment that any class can equip, then that's a different story, as all classes will have multiple abilities that spec into airborne effectiveness. Now we're gonna have to see how that plays out with Solo 3.0. Now let's look at the overview of airborne armor stats. Exotics can add or detract from your score depending on what piece you rock. Note that airborne effectiveness is only affected by some exotic armor pieces. Legendary rarity or below makes no difference. You may remember a couple weeks ago when every hunter lost their marbles over Stompies. That was because of this negative 50 airborne effectiveness stat. This is currently the only exotic that received an airborne penalty, as all the others on this list boost your airborne effectiveness by varying degrees. Really all you need to remember is to keep in mind what exotics you're running and how they're going to affect your in-air combat. Now in order to figure out your total airborne effectiveness stat, you have to add these three sources: weapons, armor, and subclass together, and that total is your airborne effectiveness stat. It's very similar to how our character stats work now. Several of our 3.0 subclass fragments will add or subtract intellect, recovery, etc. when equipped, and of course you have to factor that into your build. Now what are the actual benefits of airborne effectiveness? This gets really complicated really quickly, and I'm gonna be honest guys, Bungie didn't do a good job explaining this in the TWAB. I'm gonna do my best to make it easy and understandable, but if you're curious about more specifics surrounding aim assist and weapon accuracy, I suggest watching this breakdown we did with Chris Proctor and his firing range interview over a year ago. They discussed many different questions about the sandbox, but there was one point where he started to talk about aim assist cones and all the science that's way above my pay grade. Link will be in the description, but I'm gonna give you my bro science approach to all of this. Currently in the game, when you use your weapon in the air, your aim assist cone is halved. And when I actually mention cones, guys, just think of an ice cream cone attached to the end of your gun. The circle at the end is where the ice cream is supposed to go, is actually the area of effect of your aim assist. You also have reduced accuracy, meaning your reticle may be on the target, but the bullets will have some jitter to them and may not always land where the reticle is placed. Icarus currently functions to improve that bullet accuracy. And in Season 17, Bungie's designed the Airborne Efficiency stat to modify each of these cones in order to scale in air performance based on your investment into that playstyle. Aim Assist covers a variety of targeted areas, including reticle friction and bullet bending. Reticle friction only applies to controller players, and essentially all it does is magnetize and slow your reticle while passing over or near a target. Bullet bending is a little more complicated, and around the point of your reticle exists a circle or a cone. As long as a target overlaps with that cone, the bullets will hit or bend to that target. Now inside that cone exists another cone called the precision aim cone. Now if the precision cone overlaps with the head of your target, that shot will count as a precision hit. Currently the aim assist and precision cones are the same size. So if at any point your reticle was close to the head of your target and overlapped, it would count as a headshot. Bungie illustrates this in the leftmost graphic in the most recent TWAB. In Season 17, Bungie is reducing the size of the precision cone. At 0 airborne effectiveness, that cone will be a tiny point, meaning you will have to put your reticle directly on the head of your target to land a crit. But at 100 stat, the cone will be a 1 degree for all weapons except sniper rifles, which will be 0.5 degrees, and pellet shotguns, which will be getting a plus 25 increase in spread angle at 0 and no change at 100. We don't have a visual for how large these degrees are at the 100 stats. Again, Bungie can only relay so much to us in a TWAB, but at the very least, we can see what the 60 stat will give you. Now, I don't believe 100 stat will bring the precision cone back even with the aim assist cone like before, but it should be large enough that if you have good aim, you should be able to swing those headshots. And I should mention, Bungie is using the current half cone size we have now as the cap for Season 17 aim assist cone. So if you want your aim assist to stay the same, you'll need to have 100 airborne effectiveness. You may be saying, but Cross, why should I be excited for these airborne accuracy changes if they're just going to make my weapons worse? Well, just hold on a minute, because what Bungie is increasing is how high you can spec airborne accuracy. I mentioned earlier how Icarus used to increase your accuracy in air, so there was less bullet jitter. Well, now it gives a plus 15 to your airborne effectiveness, and if you spec into it, you can get better accuracy on your weapons than Icarus gives us currently. Bungie gives us some before and after examples. So hand cannons, before, 0.667 degrees airborne accuracy penalty. Now at the 0 stat, that is 0.45 degrees. After, at 60 stat, 0 degrees. Now sniper rifles, before 3 degrees, after 0 stat 2 degrees, after 60 stat 0.8 degrees, and at 100 stat 0 degrees. You can see here it's possible to dip below and actually make your in-air accuracy worse than it was before. But if all of our weapons have base airborne effectiveness intrinsically, then the only way you're going to hit 0 is if you're rocking stompies. Otherwise, you should be sitting close to, if not over, your current in-air performance. And if you hit that juicy 100 stat, perfect accuracy, fellas. Which means if you have good aim, then it'll feel like your feet never left the ground. Or at least in theory. Now I know most PvP players right now are like scratching their head going, what the hell? I just want to kill. I want to aim with my shotgun and think of nothing else. I get it, but you're exactly why Bungie is doing all this. They want us to build craft even inside of PvP. I see this being both good and bad. It's going to be another stat to consciously build for. And in theory, it all sounds really, really good, right? Build into the stat. The focus is shifting into less aim assist, more accuracy. Body shots are going to be a lot more common, and skill, quotations, skill, is going to have much more importance and noticeable effect on your in-air gunplay. My opinion of this is that this is Bungie's way of saying, hey, keep your butts on the ground. They don't like us jumping up in the air that much, which to me, Destiny's sweet spot is its mobility. But there are classes that are outliers. Take Icarus Dash on Dawnblade, for instance. There's a reason why stompies are getting nerfed, right? Bungie wants us to be on the ground. So in some ways, like we had the Go Fast update, this could actually slow Crucible down a tad bit, because this is actually going to make people hug the ground around a little more unless they are overly compensated here for their airborne effectiveness. Now, the shining light at the end of the tunnel when I look at airborne effectiveness is mainly exotics. Exotics have never felt good in the air because you've never been able to equip an Icarus mod. However, now with airborne effectiveness and these weapons having an intrinsic value of that, and you'll be able to stack it with certain exotics. We talked about it last week when going over different build combinations. I think exotics will benefit from this pretty nicely. Understand though, time will tell. And until we're actually playing with these changes, we won't know to the degree how much this is going to change Destiny's PvP. But with players now having to be more conscious of their builds and conscious of stats like stability for flinch resistance, it seems like PvP will be an area now that will reward that player that build crafts. Now moving on to special ammo. I'm going to get some clarifications on this one real quick. One hit kills with special ammo weaponry in PvP is going to be a lot harder as Bungie's reducing the damage bonus for things like Empowering Rift, High Energy Fire, and Inertia Override from 20% to 15% against players. Now, they do not mention the TWAB that our baby Lordly Splendor will also be getting hit with this nerf, but we know it's coming. Regardless though, all the cheesy stuff we've been doing for so long, one-hit Lawrence drivers, which by the way, Lawrence is getting its own individual nerf, Love Monarch, one-hitting Guardians, Ariana's Vow, all that stuff is going to be addressed. Now, they're also going to be disabling scavenger mods in PvP, no matter how much special ammo a player was carrying on death. You'll still only get 1 kill's worth of ammo from the drop special brick. So 1 shotgun shot, 1 sniper shot, but of course more ammo for things like trace rifles or guns like Forerunner. Now this change is pushing the PvP ammo system as far as possible. So if this move doesn't actually fix PvP special ammo predicament, Bungie will look to going back to redesigning PvP and probably going back to what they did in Destiny 1, where nobody spawned with special ammo and we actually had to pick up special ammo from ammo crates. Trust me, fellas, you don't want to go back to that. Overall, I do believe that these changes are good. Of course, we still have some outliers, most notably things like class abilities. I also think we need to see a lethality increase for a lot of our primary weapons, especially our forgotten archetypes. And we're starting to see that trickle in. As someone who likes to build craft, I do like this, but I do understand the PvP player base. And I honestly think the PvP core base is not going to like this. Sure, we're getting closer to maybe my goal, but I can tell you right now, most PvP players are not going to want to think this hard. Look, man, I'm not hating, but I know you bastards. So folks are either gonna really like these changes or really hate them. It's gonna be a polarizing change, for sure. Regardless though, we'll be covering all these things and future TWABs and other clarifications, as well as when Season 17 drops here in a few weeks. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.